I couldn't believe it. During the middle of questioning, I was questioning a doctor in a medical malpractice deposition. And now, during the middle of questioning, the doctor turns to me and says that our theory of the entire case is all wrong. You want to know why that brought me flashbacks of the movie My Cousin Vinny, where Miss Vito says the defense's case is wrong? Come join me as I share with you exactly what happened during this outrageous deposition. Hi, I'm Gerry Oginski. I'm a New York medical malpractice and personal injury attorney. This was an anesthesia case, which means that my client went in for a surgical procedure, and before the surgical procedure started, he was going to get a regional anesthetic block so that the surgery could be performed. Now, the moment the anesthesiologist administered the medication to my client, he went into what appeared to be cardiac arrest. Literally, within a fraction of a moment of a second, he immediately went into cardiac arrest. They had to resuscitate him, and obviously they had to cancel the surgery. So now, the surgery's canceled, he suffered this cardiac arrest, and now he's told to follow up with a cardiologist. And he comes to me and he says, listen, I don't understand what happened. Nobody would give me a straight answer. I was told that I had some sort of reaction to the medication, and that's why I had this problem. And now we went ahead and gathered the medical records. And our evaluation of the medical records, together with an anesthesia expert, said that since my client was allergic to the medication that was used for this anesthetic block, that this anesthetic never should have been administered to the patient. And as a result, he suffered this cardiac arrest. Now, that was our theory going forward, that because my client was allergic to a particular type of medication contained in this anesthetic, they never should have given it to him, because during the preoperative testing, my client disclosed the fact that he was allergic to this particular medication. And had they known that, and had they recognized that, they never would have used this particular anesthetic. That was our theory. Okay, so now, months later, I had an opportunity to question the anesthesiologist, who actually was the one who administered the medication causing this series of events. One of the most important things that I need to do during a deposition is to establish the standard of care. Now, why is that important? It's because this doctor is considered to be a medical expert. He has advanced knowledge, he has advanced training, and in New York, I am permitted to question him as if he is an expert by asking him what the standard of care is for this particular scenario. So now I get him to establish and tell me exactly what the standard of care is in terms of preoperative testing, understanding and learning and reading about those records, as well as knowing if there are any allergies to any particular medications. Now, here's what's fascinating. As I started to get into the details of this case, the anesthesiologist was aware of exactly what our claims were. That had he known that this patient was allergic, he never would have given this patient this particular anesthetic medication, and this never would have happened. So now the anesthesiologist tells me, listen, your claim is wrong. Your theory is totally wrong. Number one, he says, your client did not have a cardiac arrest. I said, what are you talking about? He tells me he had something called cardiogenic shock, meaning they call it a stun myocardium, that the heart was stunned because of some chemical reaction to it. That's different than having a myocardial infarction, he tells me. I said, okay, very interesting. Thank you for sharing that. Then he tells me that my client did not have an allergic reaction. I said, wait a second. How is that possible? My client was allergic to this medication. You gave him this medication, and immediately after the administration of this medication, he now went into what's called anaphylactic shock, meaning he had a severe allergic reaction, and the anaphylactic shock caused this cardiac arrest. He said, no, that's not what happened. And I'm thinking, holy cow, could my anesthesia expert have been more wrong? Now I need to explore. I need to understand what he's telling me. I need to understand why he's telling me that our theory is wrong. So I begin to ask him open-ended questions. Doctor, you're telling me that my client did not have an anaphylactic reaction? He said, no, he didn't. I said, what leads you to conclude that he did not have this allergic reaction? I didn't give this patient this medication into the muscle. He said, I inadvertently injected it into the bloodstream. And as a direct result, this medication is toxic to the circulatory system, to the heart. And now this medication immediately traveled to the heart, caused this condition to the heart that stunned it, that appeared as if it was a cardiac arrest. And now that's what happened to your client. I said, that is fascinating. So now I'm thinking in the back of my mind, so he just explained to me in something that made total sense, a series of events that totally contradicted what my expert, who I totally trusted, and he was the reason, my expert was the reason why we had been able to go forward and proceed forward with a valid case. But yet here we are, this defendant, this doctor who we sued, this anesthesiologist, is telling me that our theory is totally wrong. I could not believe it. So now I'm trying to figure out in my mind how I can use this information to try and show that this doctor was careless, to try and show that his carelessness was a cause of my client's injury. And then it became clear to me how I could do that. The very first thing I asked him was, I said, doctor, in order to go ahead and administer this particular medication, you need to do the following things. You need to identify where the nerve is located, correct? Yes. And you do that by using something called a twitch meter. Isn't that true? Yes. And the purpose of that is to try and isolate and identify where this particular nerve is that you're trying to put to sleep for this surgery, correct? Yes. And in this particular case, this twitch meter was not working. Isn't that true? Yes. You actually had to go out of the operating room and try and go find a second twitch meter that was actually working. Isn't that correct? Yes. And now when you came back in, the twitch meter still wasn't working great. Isn't that true? Yes. And now yet you still administered that anesthetic to an area that you thought was appropriate. Isn't that correct? Yes. And in fact, you were supposed to administer that needle and that injection and that medication into the muscle and the nerve where it was going, correct? Yes. And instead, you delivered this directly into the bloodstream. Isn't that true? Yes. Would administering this medication directly into the bloodstream be a departure from the standard of care? Now his attorney objected, and the doctor said, no, let me answer that. He said it is not a departure from the standard of care because you can't always determine exactly where the blood vessels are in relation to this particular nerve. Okay, so that again is a valid reason, and it seemed rational to understand his explanation. So it wasn't enough for me. So then I kept pushing it, and now I kept probing. I said, doctor, had you known that this patient was allergic to this medication, because in this scenario, the doctor did not recall and did not know that this patient was allergic to this medication. So I said, doctor, had you known that this patient was allergic to this particular medication, would it be correct to say that you would never have administered this regional block to the patient? Yes. And instead, you would have given him general anesthesia. Isn't that correct? Yes. And had you given him general anesthesia, none of this would have occurred. Isn't that true? Yes. And then I went down the road about how and why he didn't know that the patient had a particular allergy to this medication. And it all had to do with the fact that he did not read all of the preoperative testing documents that he should have read. And failing to do that, he admitted, was a departure from the standard of care. So this was a fascinating insight. And in fact, after this deposition was done, his attorney, who was a veteran, very, very experienced trial attorney, came up to me afterwards. And he said, Gerry, I have to tell you, in all the years, he'd been practicing for like 40 years at that point. He said, in all the years I've been in practice, I have never, ever seen a doctor turn around a theory of the plaintiff's case, and then I have never seen an attorney do what you did, which was to take that information and then to establish that not only was this doctor careless, but that his carelessness was a direct cause of the client's injury. That was phenomenal. That was fascinating. So just like in the movie My Cousin Vinny, where Miss Vito turns around and now on direct examination by Joe Pesci, the character who plays the defense attorney, where Miss Vito says the defense's case is wrong. And then he asks, okay, why is it wrong? And she goes on this long-winded explanation in detail that totally crushes the prosecution's case. It was hilarious. So, why do I share this with you? I share it with you just to open your eyes, to help you understand how these types of cases work in the state of New York. You know, I realize you're watching this video because you likely have questions or concerns about your own matter. Well, if your matter did happen in New York and you are thinking about bringing a lawsuit, but haven't done so because you still have questions that need to be answered, what I invite you to do is pick up the phone and call me. You know, I answer questions like yours every single day, and I'd love to chat with you. You can reach me at 516-487-8207 or by email at Gerry, Gerry, at Oginski-law.com. That's it for today's video. I'm Gerry Oginski. Have a great day.